In this video, we're going to be taking another look at VeChain to see what's going on with the price action of the VET token. Guys, as we get into it, if you find it useful, hit the like button. Really do appreciate that. Of course, if you're new, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, tap on all notifications, and you won't miss a single video that we do here at Cheeky Crypto. Right, with that said, let's get into what is going on here with VeChain. So here we have the VeChain to the USDT weekly chart when we are using Binance as the data source. Now, we can obviously see there are 5 impulse waves to the upside. This again started in March 2020 when we had that big crash. This actually kind of triggered the cycle beginning. And we can see that phase 1 just up here actually kind of peaked out in August. Now, for anyone who was around with VeChain back in 2020, you can appreciate the fantastic all-time highs that were kept being set back in August of 2020. Then went into wave 2 correction. This was quite flat and it took pretty much the entirety of the second half of the year to just kind of complete out in October, November time. Once that had bottomed, we actually triggered VeChain into wave 3, and this actually saw some fantastic all-time highs get hit. We could see that actually we had an all-time high of 27.9. I think this was actually on the 12th of April, which was a significant high there. Now, obviously, we had a pullback, and because wave 2 was flat, we have a significant sharp pullback with wave 4. Now, wave 4 is typically a 40% move of whatever the percentage would be of wave 3. So 40% of your movement in wave 3 would be a correction for wave 4, and that's roughly where we are. We could go down a little bit lower with VeChain here, but it seems to have found a pretty good bottomed area just here. So as long as that holds, we could see VeChain continue its growth into phase, or I should say, wave 5, and basically that actually puts VeChain up there towards that dollar level according to the Fibonacci retracements and extension levels, and we'll get into that in a moment. Now, on this weekly chart, we can obviously see several different support lines on our journey to the downside if we needed to find good support. So the first key one, if we were to drop down any lower than currently where we've actually bottomed out, if we do drop down lower under a scenario where Bitcoin was to drop down to, let's say, 28k, then we could see VeChain finding support at 4.6 cent. And again, that would be a pretty interesting buy area for me personally. I would say anywhere in there, it seems a pretty significant zone to potentially be by, stocking up on some VeChain. Just below that, we have 3.4. And then below that, we have 2.3. And again, that's the rock bottom for wave 4. It cannot drop any lower than basically 2.3 cent. Dropping lower than that invalidates the entire 5 waves to the upside, and we'd have to redraw everything from scratch. But I do not think that wave 4 here is likely to drop down that low. I think we'll find if we did need to find support, it's probably going to be at 4.6 cent, and that's where I'll be placing my buys going into wave 5. So let's pull this down into our daily view. And actually, before we do that, let's go back 1 second. The other thing that's really important to kind of point out is this relative strength index, guys, because we can see obviously during wave 1 here, we went up into the overbought area. We had a correction during wave 2, and that actually brought it right the way down here. We're going to go up into wave 3. We're back into the overbought area up top, right? Wave 4 actually comes down to a correction right down here. And guys, if we just put this down, you can see that we're basically at the bottom of where wave 2 brought the relative strength index. We're right back in that zone just there. So really important kind of metric to kind of monitor. Where we are right now is where we were from a relative strength index point of view at the bottom of wave 2. So again, that could be a pretty interesting signal to show us push to the upside. So just wanted to kind of point that one out to you guys. Let's pull this down into our daily chart. And here is where we have the Fibonacci retracement tool. We have our yellow box area there. So again, taking a look at the extension levels on this Fibonacci, it takes it up there to $1.01. And again, that's with my expectations of where wave 5 is likely to go. Now, this yellow box is the area of the 618, the 702, and the 786 on one of these slightly lower time frames. So we just pull this down. You can see just here, we enter it, the 618, the 702, the 786. This is the area that we're looking to basically get a closed candle above. And again, there's several of these boxes en route. So these are the areas that we're really going to find some serious resistance in. However, this is where I believe that we're going to start really seeing a motion to the upside. So I've left this one on there as a good key area for us to kind of monitor to make sure that we get a closed candle above this area. This currently comes in at about 21.5 cents. So once we're above 21.5 cents and get a closed candle here, preferably a weekly close above that threshold would be signaling us right into wave 5 and pushing significantly higher with the VET price. So that's why that is there, and it's a key metric to kind of keep an eye on. Now, the other things that you can see here is there's a clear downward trend that is still intact, and the upward trend is quite sharp. So we have to see what's going on there. Now, obviously, when we take a look at this daily chart, we can see that we are, gathering some speed with our relative strength index just below the midway point at 45. Now, the other thing I'm going to do, and I know I'm talking fast, guys, I want to give this a brief update, but I kind of want to get through this as best I can for you guys. So the other thing that we want to kind of talk about is the volume, right? So we can see that sentiment here is not the best, right? So we're pushing the price of VET to the upside. We can see that here within the chart. And then obviously at the same time as pushing the price to the upside, we also pushing the volume down. And that means that you run out of steam and you get a reversal coming back to the downside. And what you see here with VeChain is every time there's potential pullback, the volumes increase, which means there's a lot of fear in the space for VeChain at the moment. Again, we jump over to 𝗖𝗢, and that's exactly what you're seeing here from this artificial intelligence. The fear and greed index is a C3 here for VeChain. And again, we take a look at the generalized fear and greed index, which is also fear. So for VeChain, it definitely seems to be susceptible to that fear at the moment, and it's definitely indicated in the volumes and the candles and the way that they're moving. Again, we do have liquidity issues, we have Sharpe ratio issues, and again, the profitability is still up there at A1 along with the peak end value demand being B2. So there are some goods positives here, but there are some areas that we do need to improve on, and that's to understand that ultimately VeChain really doesn't, or shouldn't, at least in my opinion, be susceptible to the fear that it is in, considering all the fantastic things that are going on in the space around VeChain. It's probably one of the most solid projects out there at the moment, and it's quite remarkable how there's so much fear with VeChain. So just wanted to point that out. At the moment, we're pushing the price up, but their volumes are dropping down, that we're most likely going to see a bit of a reversal. This could be problematic on the daily chart. But when we actually pull this down into our hourly, this is where things start to get a little bit more interesting. We obviously have our downward trend. Here we can see what's going on from the downward trend perspective. I'm just going to line this up a little bit neater. I don't know why that kind of moved out a little bit. It seems to be that we actually had a bit of a breakout just a moment ago. So we have a downward trend. We also have an upward trend here. Again, not quite lining up where it was. Let me just pop this back so we can see what's going on with this upward chart. There we go. Okay, cool. So ultimately, we had this triangular wedge forming, right? We had an upward trend, we had a downward trend. Downward trend is something that's been intact for quite some time, and obviously has been a major area of resistance on the way down. Now, obviously, we're looking for a breakthrough to the upside, but it has to be a significant one as well. So although we've had various different uptrends here, ultimately we had a little bit of breakdown here. We obviously had a breakdown there, and again, this would have actually been over here most recently, right? So again, we're seeing that the upward trend is not as sturdy as our downward trend. Now, what's really key here is that we do have a breakout event here as we push to the upside, and we could potentially form a triangular wedge that we've been talking about with many of these other projects in the space. Right now, the next kind of major resistance line for VeChain comes in about 9.2 cent, and ultimately, if we're able to ride our upward trend line towards that, we're going to get funneled into a very tight space for an explosive motion to the upside. So what we're going to do is just throw that volume in and see what that sentiment is looking like right now. Here you can see that actually there's some good volume coming in, which is helping drive that breakthrough event on our downward trend. And what we're trying to avoid is this particular down part here. So we have increase in volume while pushing the price down. That's breaking a little bit. And there's a little bit of volume here, but it's not significant at the moment. So we'll have to see if this continues. If it does, then we do have some significant growth in volume whilst pushing the price to the upside. We could potentially find ourselves actually breaking this downward trend altogether and actually going up towards the resistance line of 9.2. From here, my expectations would be that we'd actually come back down and retest our upward trend. And this is because we'll be relatively high on our RSI that would also need a correction. So there's going to be several things that are going to be absolutely key for a breakout event here with VeChain. One is going to be to see continued growth with that volume coming in here, breaking and shifting away from this generalized kind of, fear in the space, right? And if we can break that fear and actually make it solid, then actually we can go up here, test this resistance, come back down and test our support with continued good volume, have that volume decrease whilst we come down. That would actually put us in a pretty good position on the relative strength index. Now, there's quite a few things that have to line up in that scenario, and 9 times out of 10, they aren't going to line up perfectly. So I imagine that we might end up, traveling inside this triangular wedge for quite some time before we have that key moment for a breakout to the upside. But with everything that's going on with Bitcoin and Bitcoin going up and looking like it's heading towards that 40K level, we could start to see, some of these altcoins like VeChain actually tag along with that on its journey. And if that is the case, then 9.2 could turn to 9.8 before having another pullback of a small pullback back down to 9.2 before actually having some major breakthrough events to actually have decent recovery on the road back up to double digit level here for VeChain. So 10 cent, 11 cent, and so forth. So right now we're actually in one of these key moments, this key pivotal moment for VeChain as to whether or not we are likely to get this breakup event where we have continued growth for VeChain on the smaller timeframes, which will hopefully shift and turn our daily view as well. Because ultimately, what we're looking for here is another breakup event on the daily chart. And that daily sentiment just is not there in the same way that we are starting to see it with our hourly view. So I would be very cautious, guys, and to see what things are looking like on that hourly and those lower time frames, as well as our daily here. But again, if you're a long-term holder of VeChain and you truly believe in the power of what VeChain is doing, then ultimately, guys, hodling is going to be the ultimate way to secure a victory during this bull run using VeChain. We are heading up to $1. I'm very confident on that. There's very few blockchain projects out there that obviously have a 5-star 𝗕𝗪 rating. And then they're the only ones in the world that have that. Alongside that, they're heavily adopted by enterprises around the world: BMW, Renault, Walmart, China, H&M. They're basically in there now with governments around China, obviously, but also over in the continent of Italy as well. There's lots going on around COVID-19, the vaccine, and certification. There's a lot going on with VeChain that just crosses outside of just one industry, but crossing over into multiple. They're also looking to get into DeFi, and for these reasons alone, this $1 level for this cycle seems so easy to accomplish. But yet, long term, think 5 to 10 years down the line, what would VeChain be worth considering the level of adoption that it's had so far? This is something that I am super confident on. VeChain seems to be one of the clear players in the space and is so heavily adopted from an enterprise level, it's hard to see this thing not succeed. Guys, if you find this video useful and informative, do go ahead and give me a like. I really appreciate it. If you're new, make sure you're subscribed. By subscribing, you will be kept up to date with absolutely everything we do here. Tap on the bell, hit on all, and you won't miss a single thing. With that said, done and out the way, guys, I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you in the next one.